The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
So now that the student athletes have finished up their tournament, it's time to concentrate on the other round ball. And as nutso as college basketball is, the NBA is just as insane. Mike Malone won a championship 2 years ago. With 3 games to go, he's fired. And at the eye of the storm could be a former Wizard, though he was a Wizard for 1 year, Russell Westbrook. He's apparently a big part of that. We'll talk about that and other things today, including the start of the Masters. Scott Van Pelt was on PTI last night and had an interesting preview, including what he thinks will happen finally for Rory McIlroy, that he'll complete his career Grand Slam. He's choked before big time in the Masters. And given what he did here in 2011, remember the U.S. Open when it was at Congressional, and he ran away with it. He was like 11 under par for the tournament, and maybe the next guy was like 5 or 6, something like that. And he's due, and SVP thinks it's going to happen for him this weekend in Augusta. We'll get to that in the 10 o'clock hour. Also, it's Wednesday. We do Orioles preview. We'll be joined by one of the voices of the team, Ben Wagner. They lost last night in Arizona, closing out the series today with a 3:40 start, and our coverage here will get underway at 3 o'clock. So, this coming from the NBA yesterday, and it's happened before in hockey late in the season. Teams will do this, and I think the Devils 10, 12 years ago made a change this late and went on to win the Stanley Cup. That's not to say the Nuggets are going to win it all, but clearly there was dysfunction in the organization. So they fired both Mike Malone and Calvin Booth. Remember, Calvin Booth was a player here with the Wizards for like 3 or 4 years. I think during the Jordan years he was here. And he was the GM. And apparently the two of them couldn't get along. Usually in those circumstances, you keep one of them. But in this case, they both go. And they're going to see what happens the rest of the way. Now, according to some reporting that was done in the was it Denver Post, that at the heart of this, besides the rift between GM and coach, the heart of this is that the GM, and of course the GM would want this is for job security, wants him to play the players that he drafted, the younger players. And Jalen Pickett's one of them, Peyton Watson, but Mike Malone's going, no, I can't trust these guys. These are rookies, so I'm playing veteran guys. And he's been playing Russell Westbrook, who's been around forever. You know, he's closing in on like 40, and he plays hard every night. But he had just a blunderous game against Minnesota last week, where Nikola Jokic had 61 points, and he just had a meltdown at the end of the game. And they lost. And I guess Booth is saying, okay, you played your veteran guy. Now let's get our rookies in there and let's get things going here. But it never happened. 6 players on the 15-man roster drafted in the last 3 years on this team. And, this is a team that has prided itself on defense. They're now in the bottom 10. And reports were that Jokic was frustrated with the direction of the team, but according to the Denver Post, he did not request a coaching change. He was notified of it in advance, but did not request it. You remember that, you may remember this, and this is one of those ones where the Warriors are saying, boy, it's a good thing we didn't listen to Steph, because Steph Curry was in favor of keeping Mark Jackson. He liked Mark Jackson, and the Warriors made the change to Steve Kerr in 2014, and I think 4 NBA championships later, that was probably the right move to make. But, this is a Denver team that won a championship on defense, and 2 of their key parts are gone. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and Bruce Brown, both of them part of the 2023 championship team, and they're gone. Is this going to work out for the Denver Nuggets? Tony and Mike looking at this yesterday on PTI.
The Nuggets have lost 4 straight, but all were without injured star Jamal Murray. The team is 15 games over 500. It's in 4th in the West, and Malone led it to the title just 2 seasons ago. So, Wilbon, does this move make sense to you?
Hell no. This makes no sense to me. Michael Malone and that team, while they have not been exactly what they want to be this year, we're not in the playoffs yet. They can still finish with home court advantage for a first-round playoff series. They still have the guy that I think, while I'm not voting for MVP, I think he's the best player in the world, and that's Nikola Jokic. Tony, it only makes sense if Jokic has somehow gone to ownership and said, Malone and I aren't getting along. And that doesn't seem to be his MO. Maybe that will trickle out in the next couple of days and we'll go, aha. But Tony, short of that, and it's not like Jokic is playing with a bunch of first-team All-NBA or second-team or third-team or even All-Stars, because he's not. So they're not underachieving. I don't have them winning this year, but they won a year and a half ago. No, does it make sense to you?
Well, you know a lot more about the league than I do, and you know a lot more about the team than I do. But if I understand this, they're firing a guy who just 2 years ago won an NBA title. They're replacing him with a guy who has never been a head coach in the pros or in college, and they're doing it with 3 games left. And you say to yourself, wait, this isn't hockey? This isn't Lou Lamoriello? Do you really think that this is going to help the squad? And I would say I don't help the squad. But I don't think it was going to help the squad. I have nothing really intelligent to say about it other than it seems like a desperate move. So you take a step back.
Either desperate or petty.
Right, you take a step back, and 2 things occur to you on a step back. One is Michael Malone this poisonous? Does he radiate toxicity and you had to get rid of him now? And the second thing is what you said. Does Jokic go to management and say, I don't want this? The way Antetokounmpo went to management in Milwaukee. The way LeBron has gone. Yeah, and they say, no, I don't. So, because if that's the case, that's different. But I would ask you, you have your ear to the ground on the league. Had you heard anything?
No, I know there's sort of been a power struggle, and there have been the talk of that. And Calvin Booth, who we got to know a little bit here in Washington when he was here, and seemed to do a good job. No, they don't have the kind of talent that overwhelmingly says, oh, the coach has to be doing better. Right. They don't have that. But there have been hints of some sort of power struggle. But that's far cry from get out with three games to go.
How can you?
And there's no clear favorite other than OKC in the West.
How do you prepare for the playoffs under this sort of turmoil? To me, the only thing I would take away is this. I would not bet on Denver. Now, I would stay away from Denver.
You have to.
I don't think you're going to get, maybe you will, maybe in the first 2 or 3 games they're going to be great, but I think long-term this has to be destructive.
No, this is not like with Michigan some years ago before the tournament.
Right.
Replay, this is not that.
Bill Frieder and Steve Fisher.
You got to go into this. It's a grind. It's a haul. It's a whole additional season. And you're going to go in this with a guy who hasn't been a head coach.
Yeah, good luck with that. Although, this is a league where if it works, you'll see other teams doing it. And if Denver makes a deep run without their head coach and without their GM, maybe you'll see some of this nonsense going on later on. Meantime, we had something last night in Oklahoma City. Now, everybody's focused tonight on Luka Doncic going back to Dallas. This is going to be a big event, and everybody in Dallas, or most people, are very upset that they traded Luka, can't believe it, and are going to give him a standing ovation. There was not, overwhelming love, let's put it that way, for Luka, although he did get them to the NBA Finals last year. But until he was traded, everybody was like, he could be in better shape, could play a little defense. And now he's like, oh, my God, it's like when they traded Wayne Gretzky in his prime. It's not quite that, but there's expected to be cheering for him, like on every possession I'm hearing tonight. But they played last night in Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City is some are saying, the best team in the NBA, best team in the West. And this is a close game. And there's 7 minutes and 40 seconds left. LA's up 108-107. And Luka Doncic gets ejected. It was his second technical foul. But for this one, this was bizarro. Dave McMenamin was there in Oklahoma City covering the game for ESPN.
Yeah, I spoke to the fan named Jeremy Price, who goes by the courtside tattooed dude, and he told me that, he was exchanging verbal spars back and forth with Luka Doncic throughout the game, telling him that his shots, he was leaving them short. And then, obviously, Luka turned back around and shot a verbal spar back at him, and the fan believed that the referee, JT Orr, thought it was aimed at him when the fan admitted it was aimed at him. And the fan told me that last year he has a history of going back and forth with Luka. They did in the playoffs last year as well. Now, the pool report, Tony Brothers, the official crew chief, said that the vulgarity was directed at the official, but clearly the fan didn't believe that was the case.
Yeah, I mean, this is a fan who is having his moment in the sun, and he's had it before with Luka. And the referee decided that what Luka said to the fan, let me get his name right. He's the tattooed fan for Jeremy Price, the courtside tattooed dude who has history with Luka going back to when he was with Dallas last year. And so that's what led to the ejection with the ref with rabbit ears, thinking that the profanity was directed at him. Not the case at all. And after Luka went out of the game, it turns into a lopsided loss for the Lakers, 136-120. This was Luka on what happened.
You can see it that happened, but I never got a fan ejected, never. But if he's going to talk, I'm going to talk back like always. So that had nothing to do with the ref, so I didn't really understand.
What's the level of frustration as you're coming back in here? Your team was up one after you make the shot, and you see OKC go on the run, and presumably you're watching in the locker room.
I mean, it was tough. I mean, we were right there. I think we fought the whole game. We were down 8 at halftime. We came back in the third quarter, and we were fighting, man. So it was tough to see that with this kind of situation that happened. And, that's on me too, so I can't let my team down like that.
OKC went on a run to end the game 29-12. Now, let me give you a little history lesson. You may or may not remember the name of Robin Ficker. Robin Ficker has been a name in town since I was a kid. This is going back well over 50 years, maybe 60 years. He's run for office a bunch of times. He used to put up signs, "My friend Ficker." But in the sports world, he's famous for being the courtside guy. Now, this is before anybody really had tattoos. Not the tattooed dude in Oklahoma City, but he was the pain in the tuchus who bought seats at the old Capitol Center behind the visiting bench. That was where his seats were. And he would show up and he would heckle the hell out of any player on the other team. And in the case of like Charles Barkley, he liked it. So when Phoenix made their big run in 1993, when they went to the finals and lost to Michael Jordan and the Bulls, he actually paid for this guy who nobody liked at the Capitol Center. Nobody, people were just tired of his act. But Barkley brought him with him on the road to heckle the other team. He thought it was funny. Now, here's the funny thing about Ficker. He's a Maryland resident, and he's a lawyer, and he, I guess, was able to get a tax deduction as long as the seats were in Maryland. So he kept his seats at the old Capitol Center, which became U.S. Air Arena sometime in the 90s. And then when they left there in 1997, they went to Washington, of course. So he didn't get the big deduction that he was looking for, and didn't, as far as I know, never bought seats at the new arena downtown. And if he did, he wasn't a presence behind the bench. Nobody heard from him again. But the last game that the Bullets played at the Capitol Center, U.S. Air Arena, was in '97 when they were playing the Bulls in the playoffs. And I remember this. There was some legal issue. I forget what it was. I don't think it was related in any way into what he was doing as a heckler. But there was a subpoena for him that was due to be served when he showed up for the game, and he never showed up. So in his last shining moment, because this was a best-of-3 series, so they played the first two in Chicago, or best of 5, I guess. Yeah, best of 5. So they played the first two in Chicago, and the third game was at the Capitol Center, which the Bullets lost. But it was a close series, and that's when Michael Jordan said, "Hey, this is a great young team of the future." And then for a variety of reasons, it all fell apart, including the trade of Chris Webber and the fact that Juwan Howard really wasn't as good as Juwan Howard was supposed to be, and all that stuff. But I just remember that the cops are waiting outside for Ficker to show up, and he never showed up. And that is his sports claim to fame. I think he's still around. I think he appears at various things, but he never recaptured his courtside fame that he had from all those years with the Bullets. So new generation, I guess. It's the courtside tattoo dude, Jeremy Price. And now he is a name throughout sports because he got himself noticed. And all these people, anybody who does that, it's not about supporting the home team. No. It's about them. And it's always been about Robin Ficker. And so when Robin Ficker would do what he did, it got him the attention that he was looking for. There was also another guy who was not as vocal, but if you remember going back to the days of the old Capitol Center, there was an older gentleman there. I forget his name, but he was actually friends with Abe Pollin, and he had a cane that was painted different colors. And his act was to stand up a lot of the game and yell at the ref and shake his cane. And in a game that's looking to get younger, I don't know if that was the look they were really looking for. And the also as a part of that period of time, as I reminisce back to the 70s and 80s, there was a retired military man. I think he was in the Air Force, and he had dachshunds. Remember tiny dachshunds? And the dachshund used to run around the court, and sometimes he'd attach a cannon to it, and he'd go around. Whew, things have changed. Much more in favor of the red panda. The woman who does that high unicycle act with the plates is much more impressive. All right, enough of that. Let's get back to the NCAA, a little cleanup there. Danny Hurley taking a seat on the psychiatrist's couch with Dan Patrick. We'll hear that conversation and some follow-up from Jay Billis on what we saw on Monday night. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
All right, coming up, we'll get to the Masters preview. Scott Van Pelt talking to Tony and Mike on PTI yesterday, and the Shadeur Sanders controversy. It is a controversy right now. And Mel Kiper has said that he would take Shadeur Sanders over Cam Ward, and the whole football draft yadarati, whatever you call them, they're up in arms about this. What are you saying? So Field Yates, who also does draft stuff, was on our morning show yesterday. I'll play some of that coming up in the 10 o'clock hour. Also, Scott Lynn, my friend, reminds me that when I'm talking about mascots at the old Capitol Center, there was a guy. His name was Bruce. I'm fuzzy on his last name, and I think Scott is too. He remembers Valant. It might be Valans, something like that. But he would dress up as the fat lady, and that was because when the Bullets won the championship in 1978, they were ahead in a series at San Antonio, and Dick Motta, who was the coach of the Bullets, was asked about being up in the series 2-1 and being in the driver's seat against San Antonio. And he referenced Dan Cook. Dan Cook was a longtime sportscaster in San Antonio. He was there when I was there in the late 70s and early 80s. And he had said on TV the night before, in saying it wasn't over for the Spurs, quote, "It ain't over till the fat lady sings." And so Dick Motta was quoting Dan Cook, and that kind of became the motto for the Bullets, who fell behind in their final series against Seattle 3-1 and won on the road. They were the last team to win Game 7 of the NBA Finals on the road until Cleveland did it in 2016. And so that created this kind of a mascot that Bruce played. Also, they made a lot of T-shirts and posters and things like that of a person, I guess it would be a woman, who was wearing an opera outfit with the Bullets logo on it, and it was the fat lady singing, and the famous call by Frank Herzog as they were about to win the championship. He said, "Warm up the fat lady. The Washington Bullets are going to win the NBA championship." All right, enough of that. Danny Hurley, who remember this time last year, it was all about Danny Hurley. Okay, back-to-back championships. Time to go to the NBA. LeBron wants you. And there was like a whole week of drama about this. He was offered the job, turned it down, went back to UConn to try and make history, try to become the first coach to win 3 in a row since John Wooden did it in 1973. Didn't work out this year, though they gave Florida a great game in the tournament, and had they won that, who knows. But his season is over, and he has said, look, I really wasn't mature enough to take the Laker job, and we saw some really bad behavior from him in the NCAA tournament as well. So this was kind of like a John McEnroe news conference where he used to, use the media to kind of air out his insecurities after he would have another outburst during a match. And so when he sat down with Dan the other day, Dan Patrick, you heard, and I always hear John McEnroe's voice because of the similar accents. This is Danny Hurley on his possible growth as a man in his 50s.
Are you doing anything to mature?
That's a tough one, I think. Number one, I'll say this. A lot of, I feel like the biggest mistake I made this year was not being able to, put together and develop a championship team. When I look at this year for me, that's the thing that I regret the most is that I wasn't able to, to put together another team that could experience championship glory. Some of the things I think that, whether it's, my relationship with officials or, some of the fan interactions or the different things that come with me. Part of what makes me successful is my passion. It's my intensity. It's this, when you're winning championships, these same things have gone on. When you're winning championships, it's called relentlessness. I've been called relentless the past 2 years, even though I've been experiencing the same types of interactions with fans and officials. This year it's been called, immature. It's been called a lot of things because, my team isn't on top. I haven't changed a whole lot that way.
If you had a little earpiece and your wife was allowed to talk to you on the sidelines during a game, how do you think that would go?
I think that I'd be hearing, stop, shut up. I would say that I think that my relationships with officials now, the Florida, the Florida post game, I regret that one greatly. That was, there was literally one play call. There was one drive to the rim that I felt if we clearly got fouled on that would have kept that game at a 2-possession game. That was just, it was ringing in my mind, and it wasn't like multiple calls I felt were missed, Dan. It was just this one play that I could not get out of my mind as I was heading through that tunnel and as I saw the Baylor players. I deeply regret that. I mean, we missed a lot of open shots and credit Florida and Clayton. I mean, they're championship level, but that one I regret deeply. I didn't believe that, and that was embarrassing. When I look at other ones that were embarrassing, I'm the best coach in the country. That was embarrassing. I wish somebody could have stopped me from having that moment. Some of the fan interactions, I've got to get somebody I think that maybe could just walk me on and off the court. Maybe like college football has those guys that walk the coach to the other coach and then just get them off the court. Maybe I need to get somebody that could just, when the game ends, just get me on and off the court. Because I don't think that my in-game coaching, I want to change a lot because we've been really successful.
But what is it about officials, though?
I don't think it's as bad as it's made out to be. I've watched these other officials, and listen, I've earned, you earn your reputation. I'm definitely a tough coach to officiate because I'm very demanding, and I value every single possession in the game because I know how important they are. But I've also modeled myself after maybe an older, generation of coaches. I'm just an intense coach, and I think I'm intense in a very similar way to Coach Sampson tonight. I think if you watch Coach Sampson closely tonight, he's a very intense coach, and he's going to be very demanding of the officials.
Well, you're like your dad, though.
You would hate my father. I mean, everyone, and my dad, I think.
No, I like being around your dad socially. when he puts his teeth in, and we have a conversation. I enjoyed being around him. I don't know what we were watching, like I don't know, some sitcom, or not even a sitcom. It was some cop show when I went to his apartment in Jersey City. And I'm going, yeah, he seems really nice. He's just a nice guy. And then you hear these horror stories about how demanding your dad was.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Dan, it's like you got to be able to separate the competitor, the combatant.
But could you coach like this, like you are right now?
No.
You couldn't just be like,
it doesn't line up with our play style. It doesn't line up with the intensity that we play with. It doesn't line up with how we attack the offensive glass, or how hard we play defensively. And it's not just me, it's our whole bench. I mean, we lead the country in warnings from officials to have everyone sit down. I mean, everyone on my bench is like out of pocket. Like it's just, we're an emotional program, we're a passionate program, and I don't think I'm going to change a whole lot of that. But I do, upon reflection, I think that the interaction with, people not on my team, or I would like to probably have less of that.
Yeah, Bobby Knight never said anything like that. Bobby Knight never said, "Yeah, I probably should calm down a little bit." He's at least saying that, and I think he's a very interesting psychological study. This Malott said that he's still frustrated over the fact that he didn't live up to being a player in college like his brother was, great player at Duke, and probably would have had a really good NBA career had he not had that car accident. And I think that drives him. But it's too bad. Well, it's too bad, really, that Sports Illustrated isn't Sports Illustrated anymore. And it's also kind of too bad that that Gary Smith is not writing anymore, whether he's writing for SI or any other publication. You remember Gary Smith was with Frank DeFord and a handful of other great writers at Sports Illustrated. He would do these long profiles on athletes and coaches and sports figures, and he would dig down into this psychological stuff. This was his wheelhouse, and Danny Hurley would be such an unbelievable subject for him to drill down on what drives him to do what he does. And having watched him, you watched him succeed for 2 years, and they won all their games in the tournament last year by double digits. So to see him struggle this year, you got to see some of his warts. And the warts are probably things that would have prevented him from being a good NBA coach. I mean, it might not have been inconceivable if this would have lasted less than a season in Los Angeles. This has been tried before, like Jerry Tarkanian, who was a great coach, played a little fast and loose with the rules, but put together those great UNLV teams. He lasted like half a season with the Spurs. He didn't even know the NBA rules that well. Not that Hurley wouldn't know the rules, but I think there's something to be said for that. Pat Forty wrote a really good column on the championship game from the other night, and as I talked about yesterday, sometimes in a game like that, it's much more interesting to examine the losing team than the winning team, and the losing team will be remembered for. What was it? Just a horrific ending. It was just something that you just don't see in any basketball game, much less a championship game. And what Forty did is he looked at the Houston team, and they are the Buffalo Bills of college basketball. They've been to the Final Four 7 times, 0 for 7. And a lot of it is timing and circumstance. As he points out, the great teams that they had with Elvin Hayes, 66-68, they ran into Lou Alcindor and the UCLA Bruins. Lou Alcindor has got to be one of the top 3 or 4 college basketball players who ever lived. Elvin Hayes was great. They had Don Chaney on that team, longtime pro, but UCLA was just better. They went 58-6 over those 2 years, lost twice in the Final Four to UCLA. Then in the 80s, you remember the Georgetown team that lost to North Carolina with Fred Brown throwing the ball away. It's forgotten that was the beginning of the Phi Slamma Jamma team with Clyde Drexler and Hakeem Olajuwon, and they lost to North Carolina in the semifinals. The North Carolina team with Dean Smith as coach, Michael Jordan, James Worthy, Sam Perkins, all first-round picks. They lost that. Then the incredible game against NC State where Lorenzo Charles has the dunk, and then they make it the third straight year, and they lose to Patrick Ewing and Georgetown, and that's one of the great teams of all time. Probably should have won 2 in a row and maybe even 3 in a row if Fred Brown doesn't throw the ball away. So as 40 points out, think of this. In 1985-86, the shot clock came into the college game. Had it been in use during the Phi Slamma Jamma era, the 54-52 slog against NC State likely would have ended much differently. The Wolfpack held the ball for more than 45 seconds before the flukish finish. I mean, if you watch like on YouTube a game from that era, you wouldn't believe it. But that was the strategy. And Dean Smith had the 4 corners in the 70s. They would chew up sometimes minutes off the clock. He had a point guard named Phil Ford, who was a great college player, had some drug problems in the pros. Otherwise, I think he would have been a Hall of Fame NBA player. And Phil Ford ran the 4 corners brilliantly. And, you know, Dean Smith was doing what the rules allowed. That wouldn't happen today, and they'd still be good. But what 40 is saying is NC State wouldn't have been able to pull off against Houston what they did. Anyway, Jay Billis yesterday on the Rich Eisen show, wrapping up the final and who he thought was the better team. Was it, in fact, Florida?
I do think they were the best team. From probably the middle of the season on, Florida had a different look to them as a team with their size up front and depth, and then great guards. And they've got Walter Clayton Jr., who can score. He's an on-demand scorer. He can make challenge shots, and when things break down, he can just take over. And he had a Kemba Walker-like tournament. He might not have had his best game in the final, but when he was held scoreless in the first half, but came back in the second half, had 11. He had 7 assists in the game and made some of the bigger defensive plays, especially the last one. But Florida played in the toughest league in the SEC, and I thought they emerged as the best team. But Houston and Duke were formidable, but Florida pushed everybody back. And even when they had their backs against the wall in a number of games, they executed down the stretch, mostly because of Clayton. I mean, they beat Auburn in the semis just because they had Walter Clayton Jr. and nobody else did. But I think it was more of a total team effort in the game against Houston. And that was the first time, Rich, Houston, when they hold their opponents under 70, they are 30-0. And this is the first time all year that an opponent had scored under 70 points and won. And Florida was that opponent. They did it with defense. They were, in the second half, they were really fantastic defensively. And that was the way they did it against Auburn, too.
Yeah, and then obviously the defense on the final possession of the game. You've seen a ton of basketball, Jay. Have you ever seen a game of this magnitude end like that, where guy goes in the air, gives himself up, and knows if I touch this basketball, there's a violation, and we lose the game? And I've never seen anything like that in my life.
I've certainly seen the play before where that happens, but I've never seen it on a final play where the shooter, after they sort of drop the ball because they know if they come down with it, they're going to get called for travel. And Emmanuel Sharp knew he couldn't pick it up. In retrospect, he probably would have been better off just picking it up. Yeah. Clock stops, and maybe they can get a 5-second call or a steal or something. But it was really unusual. And I know for Kelvin Sampson, it's probably the last 4 possessions, not getting a shot. When you don't get a shot up and you turn it over, certainly you don't get a chance for an offensive rebound. You don't get a chance to get fouled. And I think the disappointing thing is they were only down 2 points, and both teams were in the double bonus. I thought they were going to try to drive it and get into the paint, and then if you draw help and in a rotation, you can kick it out for an open 3. But you have to give credit to Florida. I mean, Houston started that out on the right side of the floor, and Florida switched out. Thomas Houck did a great job on a switch and stopping the ball, and they limited L.J. Cryer. They wouldn't let him get it back on a little rescreen action where he's coming back to the ball, and they wound up getting it to Emmanuel Sharp in their third option of that play. And it was just a great closeout by Walter Clayton Jr. Yeah. What you would hope in that was that Sharp would have shot faked and then drive, because if you shot fake in that situation, the defense is more than likely going to go for it. But he went up for the shot, and Clayton took it away from him. It was just really good defense. Yeah, they were terrific. The defense, as you point out, Jay Billis, and it's amazing how last year they're one and done, giving up triple digits to Colorado
in getting bounced, and now here they were the only team to win 6 games in this tournament, and the defense. I mean, you got to give Coach Golden some credit here for remaking, right?
That's really a good point, because last year when they lost to Colorado, they were probably ranked in the 90s nationally in defensive efficiency. But, that's kind of the value of having players that you get to come back. Florida didn't have a lot of 5-star recruits out of high school. A lot of these guys were under-recruited. Walter Clayton Jr. was a football player, and he was heavily recruited as a free safety by Florida and by Alabama, by Georgia, other big shot football programs. But he wanted to play basketball, so he went to Iona, and he played for Rick Pitino for 2 years. And he was a MAC Player of the Year at Iona, and then transferred to Florida to play for Todd Golden. But Elijah Martin played at Florida Atlantic. There were a bunch of guys that weren't, sort of your top 50, top 30 recruits. And I think the same thing went for Houston. Houston had maybe some higher valued high school recruits, but, not your McDonald's All-American types. And that's why I thought, before the tournament started, that Houston was going to beat Duke, because Houston has, they're older, certainly in spots, but they played in close games all year long. They live in those games. And Duke didn't. Duke had the highest margin of victory in the tournament, and they don't play in any close games. And so how were they going to behave when the game was on the line? And it turned out that was a deciding factor. If they had done a few things better, still could have, arguably should have won. But, not being in that fire time and time again, because you look back on some of the great teams of the past, they were all challenged. And Houston and Florida, they were challenged game in, game out in their leagues, and Duke wasn't. That's not an excuse, but it was pointed out before the game by a lot of us, saying, "Hey, this could be a real factor," and it turned out that it was.
And for some of us, this is mind blowing. That's Jay Billis yesterday on the Rich Eisen show. Jay played in the ACC when there was the ACC and everybody else. I mean, this was Michael Jordan's ACC. You played tough games night after night after night. So by the time you get to the tournament, you're tested. And the ACC outside of Duke this year stunk. And when Maryland went to 2 Final Fours, they went there partly because they were tested by Duke, by North Carolina. I think NC State was pretty decent in those days. Wake Forest may have been pretty good. I mean, they were playing tough games night after night after night. And so here's Duke. They waltz into the ACC tournament. They don't even have Cooper Flag. They win that anyway. And until they get to the final, they're really not tested. And then the semifinals, once they get there, that's what happens. It's incredible because, all of my youth and into my adulthood and even old age, it was the ACC. That was the jewel conference for college basketball. And now it's nothing. It's a conference that's loaded with teams and produced 3 for the end. The SEC had 14 and the ACC had 3. Well, you saw what happened there. All right, next hour, we'll talk to Ben Wagner, one of the voices of the Orioles, with the Orioles preview. They're off to kind of a rough start, losing again last night. And also Scott Van Pelt, a guest on PTI yesterday, a little Masters preview, and why he thinks Rory McIlroy will finally win the Masters. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. Hey, can you believe the Nationals are having a better start than the Orioles? Okay, it's April, and those things happen. But with the Dodgers in town, you'd have thought, oh, boy, that's bad news. Nats are playing really well. I mean, a month from now, who knows? But they go for the sweep this afternoon, and I'll tell you what, James Wood, very impressive last year and on his way to being a superstar here. He had 2 more home runs last night, drove in 5 runs, and man, that is a guy who you should keep an eye on because, and this doesn't happen very often in sports. It happened with the Orioles with Cal Ripken, where Cal Ripken grew up in Aberdeen. His father had been a lifer with the organization, former minor league player, transitioning to minor league manager, major league coach, and eventually manager of the Orioles. And Cal played his whole career in Baltimore. James Wood has that opportunity. We're a long way away from that. But here's a kid who grew up in Olney, Maryland, winds up in the Padres organization. So you think, oh, God, he's never going to wind up playing close to home. And then he's part of the trade in the Juan Soto deal, and he's paying big dividends. And really, he's a big guy, plays a rangy outfield. He's got some speed, and he's very exciting to watch. And I remember the days back in New York when I was covering the Mets back in the 80s. You could not miss a Darryl Strawberry at bat. And I think we're getting to that point with James Wood. So a lot of fun with the Nats the last few days, and they're going to close out the series today. And the Orioles are finishing up an afternoon game in Arizona. And then they come home for a really long homestand. They're home starting on Friday all the way through the 20th. And then they play 3 games against the Nats. So that'll be nice for them. They don't have to get on an airplane for like 3 weeks. That's a really cool thing. All right, Isaac Kuhn Harris is with us today. Do you play golf? Do you play any golf?
I wish.
Yeah. Have you played?
I have, but I'm not very good.
Do you like to play?
I do, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
your dad like to play?
Yes, he loves to play.
Loves to play. Okay, great. Your dad, has he ever told you about Lee Elder?
He's mentioned, the names came up in the conversation.
Okay, well, climb up on Grandpa Andy's knee here because I need you and everybody else to know about how important this was, not just nationally, but locally as well, 50 years ago. Lee Elder was a Washingtonian. He didn't grow up in Washington. He's from Dallas, but his wife was from here. He lived here. He later worked at East Potomac Park, like running the whole golf operation there. So this was a local thing and a big deal, and he made it to the Masters finally 50 years ago. 50 years ago this week. Rick Mace wrote a terrific story about it in the Post yesterday. And to recognize what the Masters was at the time, there had been a color line, let's face it, because Charlie Sifford had won tournaments prior to when Lee Elder won in 1974. That's, of course, how you qualify for the Masters. You have to be a winner on the tour, but they have to also invite you. And Charlie Sifford was not invited to play. This was in the late 60s. And Jim Murray, who was a great columnist, won a Pulitzer Prize with the L.A. Times, he wrote in 1969 when this happened, "The Masters is as white as the Ku Klux Klan. Everybody in it can ride in the front of the bus." But it just didn't resonate in those days. And the Masters had a chairman who also was one of the founders of the club, Clifford Roberts, and he said at one point, "As long as I'm alive, all golfers will be white and all the caddies will be black." Yeah, and you're raising your eyebrows now. But that was an accepted comment in the 1970s, I think, early 1970s. Yeah. How about that?
I mean, I knew the Masters history of, segregation, that they didn't integrate the golf club
for membership.
Yeah. But that, I've never heard that quote before, and I'll be honest, and I feel like kind of upset that I haven't heard that quote before. I feel like I should have already known that.
Yeah. So again, this is, and you got to recognize what an historic week this was. In the year before, 1974, Hank Aaron breaks Babe Ruth's record on April 8th. And the eloquent call from Vin Scully, a black man is being cheered in the Deep South for breaking the record of a baseball icon, just perfect. And then exactly a year later, Frank Robinson breaks the color line for manager. Same week, Lee Elder breaks the color line at the Masters. He'd won the Monsanto Open. But listen to this. In May of 74, at the Monsanto Open in Pensacola, Florida, that's Deep South, he defeated Peter Oosterhuis in a sudden death playoff. Oosterhuis took his golf cart to the clubhouse. Elder had to be escorted by police to ensure his safety. The death threats had already started coming in, and Elder's victory ceremony was moved indoors away from the public. And that same week, Hank Aaron had death threats, and there was one that said there was somebody in the stands with a gun. And if you don't know this, one of the umpires was a Secret Service agent. Yes, pretending to be an umpire. That's how volatile it was. You know, a black man in Atlanta breaking Babe Ruth's record. People did not want that to happen. Anyway, it says here, with his Masters invite formalized over the next 11 months, the threats, the hate mail, and the concerns intensified. In Augusta, he made sure to have bodyguards nearby. He rented 2 houses and a hotel room so nobody could be certain where he was staying. All of his meals were prepared by the kitchen staff at Payne College, a historically black school in town. He's worried about where he's going to be staying. He's playing kind of a shell game here, so they don't even know where he is, and he's worried about his food being poisoned. So his meals are being prepared in a kitchen. This is when I was in high school, okay? You know, this wasn't in the 1950s. This was for me anyway, a relatively recent time. Anyway, Elder also was not of, even, Tiger had some privilege in that his father was retired military and had the time to teach him golf, and they were able to play every day at the military country club. This wasn't the case with Lee Elder. He was born in Dallas, one of 10 children in a poor household. His father died in Germany during World War II. His mother died 3 months later, and at the time, Elder was sent to Los Angeles to live with an aunt. And that's when, a lot of guys start out as caddies and, they play when there's opportunities to do that. And finally, he joined in 1961. There was something called the United Golf Association Tour, which was essentially the Negro Leagues for golf. Black professionals who were barred from the PGA Tour in 1961, barred from the tour. He had one stretch won 18 out of 22 events. Finally, the tour changed its rules, and he earned his tour card in 1968 as a 34-year-old rookie. This is Jackie Robinson of golf, and people probably don't know his name. But the things that he had to deal with at the time, he did not make the cut at the Masters. He played several more times, but there were people, obviously, who were interested in what he was doing. In the gallery, where they said was as large as 500 people when he was playing his 2 rounds. He did not make the cut in 75, and one of them was Jim Brown. And he said to the Post at the time, the significance of this is not so much for Lee Elder as it is for the concept. This is important because it helps the concept of people being able to compete and achieve at anything. Jim Brown, who came into a league in football that was integrated in 1957, but the Redskins were still all white at the time. He was somewhat of a trailblazer himself. Just a remarkable story. And then Elder finally got an opportunity in 2021 to be an honorary starter. This was after the George Floyd killing, and there was heightened awareness and so forth. So he went out there with legendary winners like Jack Nicklaus and Gary Player. He had an oxygen mask at the time, and then died a few months later at the age of 87. Just absolutely remarkable. So now, go home and impress your dad with what you know about Lee Elder. Okay,
We'll do.
Yeah.
We'll do. We'll have that convo.
I'm sure he's about my age, right?
Yeah, he's actually a couple years younger than you, like maybe 2 years,
like most people. But I think he probably would. If he hasn't seen the story, I'm going to give it to you. He would appreciate that. All right, this Masters. Scott Van Pelt, who will be doing the clubhouse work for ESPN for the first couple of days, on yesterday on PTI with Tony and Mike, and about who he thinks will win the tournament, and he believes it'll be Rory McIlroy. Here's why.
The Masters is the only major that Rory McIlroy has not won. He said this morning he wants to treat it like any other tournament. Pardon my skepticism, but is that even possible for him?
Heavens no. How could you possibly treat the one tournament that you've not won to complete the career slam as if it were pick a venue, like another tour stop? It simply isn't. That said, I and other folks that cover the tour more closely on a week-to-week basis really like his chances. I've said, in fact, I picked him. I think that there's a time. I think every man has a time, and I think it's his time, and it's a combination of his headspace in life, how he's playing, and just the belief that he's too talented to not eventually win here. And it would come down, Tony, to playing well the first day. He's largely put himself out of position. You need to stay at least within arm's length of the leaders, I think, because otherwise you're playing catch-up. And we've seen him have these great weekend finishes where he makes the top 10. He didn't care about that. He wants to win. I don't believe you can make it like a normal event. I don't think he's probably prepared like it's a normal event. I think he tells us that because then we'll leave him alone.
Yeah, that makes sense. It
all
does.
the sense in the world.
It does. A guy who doesn't have any of these concerns is Scotty Scheffler, because he's won 2 of the last 3 times in Augusta. And Scott, I don't know if you believe in horses for courses, but if you do, what makes, what is it about Augusta National that really suits Scotty Scheffler?
I think any course he plays on suits him because he has this amazing ability to drive it incredibly well, hit it close with his irons, which is critical here, understand where to hit it, and then maybe more importantly, where not to. If he hits it out of position here, his ability to get up and down, if you remember some of the remarkable shots that he's hit here to change the momentum of rounds where he's making birdies from off the green, his ability to do that, and then his incredible ability, Michael, to treat every round here as if it is just a round at home with his friends. He's unbothered and unimpressed by a good round, and he's unbothered by a poor round. And that's rare. That's a rare gift, and I mean gift. And I think Scheffler has that on top of his golfing gifts. So all that together allows this week not to become some monstrosity. And when you've already won it twice, you know you get to come back here for the rest of your life. So you're not burdened in the way that Rory is.
Scott, a guy that I've started to root increasingly for in recent years is Xander Schauffele, who won, of course, the PGA and the Open last year, finished no worse than tied for 3rd in the other 2. But it seems he's like flying under the radar now. Is there a reason, or where's his game now?
I think, Michael, largely it's just his absence from the tour. He injured his rib, and so he's only played 4 times. And I was involved with the TGL this year where he was playing with the New York team, then didn't play, obviously, because he was injured. Came back to play some there. He just hasn't played a ton of tournament golf. Having said that, he's played a bunch of great golf here. 4 top 10s in the last 6, I believe I have that right. Bookkeeping could be off, but I know that it's a bunch of really, really good results here. And I value that, frankly, more than I do if he had been playing well in the past month and a half on the PGA Tour. Coming here knowing you know how to play this place, he does. And also, since he was here last, fellas, he's done the thing he hadn't done, which is not just win a major. Now he's won 2 majors. And oh, by the way, you win this one and you're 1 away from the Slam. I think Xander will win here eventually. Again, I already picked Rory, so I can't pick 2 guys, but I would expect him to play well.
How's his health and the rib, just to follow up going into this?
Has been unbothered since he's come back. Hasn't been an issue, but he did the hardest thing, I think, for athletes to do. He gave himself enough time to let it get better. And you guys play the game. I mean, imagine every swing hurts your rib. You need to give yourself the time to get right, and he did that.
By the way, just for the record on this show, because Wilbon does it all the time, you can pick more than one person. You can pick as many as 6 or 7.
Don't.
Wilbon does it all the time. We will get you out of here on this. The LIV golfers have not gotten all that much attention lately. Do any of them stand out to you heading into Augusta?
All of them. Honestly, all of them. If I believe DeChambeau will play well. I believe Rahm will play well. He won here a couple of years ago. And this becomes a longer conversation that I know we don't have time for, just about how people consume LIV or don't. I just don't know people that casually consume it. And I'm not making a value judgment against that tour. I just don't hear people talking about it. That said, there's a bunch of excellent players out there. I expect Koepka to play well just because every major he seems to. Hell, Phil a couple of years ago finished 2nd. So do I think any of them play well, Tony? I believe all of them will, because there are so many of those guys. Neiman, I didn't even mention his name. He could win here and it wouldn't be a shock at all. So I expect a lot of the familiar names to be in the mix from Thursday on. And in the end, I just think it's Rory's time.
I think, and that was Scott Van Pelt with Tony and Mike, I think outside of the hardcore golf people, there's no awareness of the LIV Tour at all. And for most of us who pretty much only watch the majors, we don't really care. Let them have their regular week tour, and if it's a 3 round, so what? So whatever happens to it it's a bizarre situation because there's just so much money. They're not going to fold it up, but they've never become a presence on TV. And all that talk about the merger and all that's seemingly gone. So they may just wait for it to go away. I mean, I could see that. But when this was a raging controversy, Phil Mickelson has left for the LIV Tour. Oh my! So what? Right? I mean, I think Van Pelt's got it right. It's It just is what it is. And then when it comes to the major time, they're allowed to participate anyway. So it doesn't really matter. All right, shifting to football. And, God, it feels so good as a fan of the Commanders to stand back and watch all this yapping about quarterbacks and go, oh, yeah, isn't that interesting? Yeah. Oh, yeah, Cam Ward, Shadeur Sanders. Who's Jackson Dart. He may go ahead of Shadeur. Huh? Doesn't matter, right? Isn't that great? Doesn't matter anymore. 25, 30 years, I got to find a quarterback. How are they going to find a quarterback? Can they get a bridge quarterback? Get Donovan McNabb. Can they have him for a few years? Carson Wentz. All gone, all dissipated. But the debate rages on for everybody else. Field Yates was on our morning show on Sportsmanlike yesterday, and Mel Kiper has set the draft world on fire because he believes that he would take Shadeur Sanders over Cam Ward, even though many are projecting Cam Ward to go number 1 to Tennessee. So Field Yates, who does draft analysis along with Mel, was on our morning show on Sportsmanlike, and he's actually taken an up-close look at Shadeur and likes what he sees.
I went to the pro day hoping that things would look as expected, and they looked as expected, right? The accuracy is really good. The ball placement, touch, all of that stuff is in line with what you saw over 4 seasons of college tape. The arm strength I thought was fine on Friday as well, right? Not going to blow you away. And so I wanted to kind of dive into where the arm strength matters or why arm strength still matters, because it's not like every single throw throughout the course of the game is a 50-yard bomb down the field, right? So it does matter on deep shots, right? It can matter on deep shots if you're playing in elements especially, who are the 2 teams that we've talked about the most at the top of the draft that could be Shadeur Sanders teams. The Cleveland Browns, who play, that lake effect weather is real, and the Giants, who, it's not as treacherous in New York as it is in Cleveland, but as we know, by November or so, things can get hairy weather-wise up here in the Northeast. So it can matter in that regard, but also the other thing about Shadeur and arm strength is that Shadeur is not as innovative or athletic as Cam Ward navigating the pocket. And when you don't have the same level of escapability within the pocket, sometimes you just have to make a throw because you can't get out of the grasp of a defender. And having that rocket arm, even if you aren't able to get out of the grasp of a defender, can allow you to make some throws that you otherwise would not be able to make. So it's I would say, sort of sufficient arm strength combined with the sufficient escapability with Shadeur that I think makes it more of a concern than a different quarterback, perhaps a quarterback who is so dynamic that he can find his way out of trouble more frequently than Shadeur can. So I think Shadeur's got a lot of good. I have the 16th on the overall big board this year. I just think that teams at the top feel as though if you're going to take a quarterback in the first 3 picks, you have to believe that he is great. You have to be convicted. And the intel of late seems to suggest that both the Browns and the Giants don't feel that way about Shadeur, in part because Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter are just that good.
Field, what's the intel telling you about Jackson Dart? We hear a lot about Shadeur. We hear a lot, of course, about Cam Ward. Do you think Jackson Dart is a guy that will go in the first round?
Man, people keep asking me, Michelle, if you were to set, is it 3 or 4 quarterbacks that go in the first round? Because I do think 3 is a number that ends up where I think that's where we end up landing with Jackson Dart. And what I can't tell you specifically right now is what team is the most logical suitor for Jackson Dart, because I'm not sure what the most logical suitor is anymore for Shadeur Sanders. Jackson's a guy who I think has a lot of – here's one of the people keep asking, so what doesn't Jackson Dart have that would prevent you from having a higher grade on him? And I say, it's not that Jackson doesn't have some of the qualities that you are looking for in a quarterback. It's just to what level does he have the requisite traits. He is a good athlete. He does have good arm strength. He did throw the football successfully down the field last year. It's just relative to some of the guys that we have seen go in the first round in recent years, specifically the 3 at the very top last year. Those traits are just not at the same level of the guys like Caleb, Jaden, and Drake, who went 1, 2, 3 last year. I think the range for Jackson Dart is probably as early as 9th overall at the New Orleans Saints, and probably as late as the early 2nd round, which would be the Giants and the Browns, or the Browns and the Giants pick 33 and 34 overall. What I don't know is this, and this might be one of the compelling storylines of night 1 of the NFL draft, is let's say there's a scenario where both Shadeur Sanders and Jackson Dart slide past the Saints at number 9, and then we start to hover into the territory of the Pittsburgh Steelers at 21. because those quarterbacks are falling, do we see teams act aggressively and try to get back up in the order in the first round? Maybe jump ahead of the Pittsburgh Steelers, or maybe jump ahead of the LA Rams at 26. We don't have a quarterback need for this year, obviously, but Matthew Stafford is year to year. They may be saying to themselves, this is about our 2026 investment and beyond. That, to me, is sort of the second half of the first round storyline that is most interesting going into the draft 2 weeks out.
So that is the view from Field Yates of what's going on with the draft. We've got it. 2 weeks from tomorrow, right? Yeah, 2 weeks from tomorrow. One of the interesting things that I saw the other day is that Jalen Milroe, the Alabama quarterback, is going to be at the draft, which can create an embarrassing situation. Everybody remembers Aaron Rodgers sliding down the board, but that was when they were having a draft on Saturday afternoon. Now it's a 3-night event, and the first night they only do the first round. This happened with Geno Smith. Geno Smith was supposed to be a first-round pick coming out of West Virginia, and he lasted, it was the third round? Definitely the second round, so he had to come back the next night. Maybe that's going to be the case with Jalen Miller. You know, with the way that everything is Zoom and remote now, unless I was assured, 100% assured, like top half of the draft, I wouldn't show up. Even with that, they have the cameras. Oh, he's still waiting with his family to get picked. What's going to happen here? So I don't know if you want that embarrassing situation. Though, ultimately, you have to say it worked out damn well for Aaron Rodgers, and it worked out pretty darn well for Geno Smith, who just signed another contract with the Raiders to be reunited with his coach, Pete Carroll. So we'll see where that goes. This was a real tragedy the other night. You might have heard about that roof collapse in the Dominican Republic. And it was reported that Octavio Dotel passed away. And Octavio Dotel is a known major leaguer. Played 15 years with the Mets, the Astros, the A's, the Yankees, Royals, Braves, White Sox, Pirates, Dodgers, Rockies, Cardinals, and Tigers. Whew, he toured the league. Sadly, he was one of 66 people killed in this. You would really have to be a longtime Nats fan to remember this name, but equally as tragic, Tony Blanco died in this. Tony Blanco played with the Nats in the first year, and he played only 56 games. He hit 177, and that was really his only major league experience. He played forever. He played in Japan for like the next 15 years or something like that. But, that was just such a tragic thing. He's got a son who's playing in the Pirates minor league system. But, these are people who are out, having a good time. This has happened here in this country. We had this maybe 30 years ago that people were on a balcony at a hotel. It might have been Vegas, some place like that, and it collapsed. I have a deck in the back of my house, and I'm always wary of that. You're not supposed to have more than 12 people out there. So, you probably could push that a little bit, but you have these times where things just happen in these tragedies, and something like that is not something you would expect when you go out for a night, for a good time at a nightclub. And very, very sad. They had a moment of silence for Dotel last night in New York before the Mets game, and they were playing the Marlins. And that's just an awful thing. So, best to the families of those two former major leaguers. All right, coming up, we will get to the Orioles, who have had a rough start, and they've had a rough start that includes injuries. They are without a couple of big names, including Grayson Rodriguez, who's not been able to start the season. They picked up Charlie Morton as their big free agent signing, and he has been disappointing again last night as he walked 5 and hit a batter, control problems. And we've got him on the psychiatrist's couch, too, with the media, so we're going to play some of that. But next, we'll talk to one of the team broadcasters, Ben Wagner. He'll join us next on the Andy Pollin Show as we continue with Orioles preview next.